Hi guys, it's Steph from IDRIVEACLASSIC, and today I'm back in a super cool and super rare car from 1990. And for those of you a little bit older like me, you'll have definitely heard of it. It is the Rover Montego, and for those of you who may think it's called an Austin, they were called an Austin too, and it's one of those funny changeovers. And this is one of the very first ones that was badged a Rover. Their name changed over in 1990. But anyway, I'm waffling, and I cannot wait to show you this car today. And in this very fun video, I'm going to show you around the outside, show you the inside, show you one of the coolest modifications I've ever seen to add a few extra seats in, and then I'm going to show you under the bonnet, and we're going to go out for a drive too, and hopefully I'm going to add in a little bit technical as well. So belt up, because we're about to go for a drive in one of the rarest British leyland cars still on the road today in England. Surprise, this is quite a nice one. So today we are looking at a Rover Montego, and there's going to be some people watching this video that are like, oh god, it reminds me of my dad, and there'll be some people that are like, oh, it reminds me of childhood. And I quite like that. And there'll be some people as well, some of the younger people, maybe the under age of 25 that are watching this, that don't really know much about Montegos. But for me, it just reminds me of like dads on the school run. And so it's quite nice really, because these cars that you kind of remember from childhood, that you remember seeing all the time and that you don't see anymore, it's quite nice to do a bit of a video with them, because one day, it's a bit like animals that are going extinct, one day people won't remember Montegos, and they'll just be a car, probably a little bit like the Metro, that end up in museums, and people go, oh, you know, it's just one of those cars. So today I'm hopefully going to take this car out and tell you a little bit about the Montego and get you on side for British Leyland, because for some of you who don't know this already, I am obsessed with British Leyland cars. So naturally I am going into this slightly biased, and I'm hoping to find the best bits of the Montego, because I think some of the British Leyland cars get really bad press, and I want to give you guys a different, more warmer, rose tinted view of British Leyland, because I don't think enough people are pro BL. And PS, really exciting fact, or I'm a bit excited about this because I'm a bit sad, is that this car was registered near Huddersfield, which is where I currently live, and I'm a bit of an honorary citizen, and we're actually filming very far away from Huddersfield today. We're filming over 200 miles away in Kent, probably hence why the sun is shining and it's not pouring down with rain, and this car's still looking quite nice. Now as we come round to the front, you'll see that this car is in quite good condition, and that's because Colin has done a little bit of touching up. So why don't we have a look inside, because the inside is actually in really good condition too. So I'm going to open up the door there for you. By the way, this is, I know this is really, really sad, but the door's shut really nicely on this car. Bar the door that I think is how somebody broke into it once. That's what I got told. Anyway, as we come and look inside, you'll notice that the interior is in quite good shape. And that's probably because the mileage on this car is actually very low. It's sitting under 40,000. And as we have a look around the car, when I was talking to you about how I thought that the Escort Mark III felt very modern, this doesn't feel like we've really moved on that much. Still feels very plasticky, and it still feels, you know, like I almost feel like there's a bit of an era where all the interiors were quite plasticky, and you know, it was people just throwing in a few random dials, and it doesn't feel like there's been much progress. And in fact, in some ways this is far less stylish than the Escort, but the seats are actually far more comfortable, which I'll talk to you about as I take you for a drive. So before we head off on our little drive, let's have a look under the bonnet. Colin told me this was a car that offered absolutely everything, including 2 extra seats, which he promised were quite easy to get out, and in less than 1 minute he showed me how to put them together, and they're actually quite comfy. In addition to this, you can fold down the back seats for massive loads of luggage or drunk eBay purchases. I thought I'd give you a quick peek under the bonnet, because at some point in kind of the late 90s going into the early 2000s, cars became, like they are now, a little bit like you couldn't do it at home. You couldn't just go and buy a toolbox down at Halfords and get all the bits and do it at home yourself. It started becoming a bit more complicated. Whereas when you look at this, you've still got kind of things that are quite easy to do. So you've got carburettors and things like that your old school mechanic would recognise and be able to do quite simply. And I think if you were going to have a Montego now, it's definitely something you could work on at home with what I would consider relative ease. Guys, I'm going to start the car up now so we can hear how she sounds. And by the way, look at this. It's ridiculous. My hair is touching the roof. So I guess big hair was out by 1990. Anyway, we're going to start this car because I want you to hear how she sounds. So without a delay, let's go for it. That engine sounds so smooth. I wish mine sounded that nice. Give it a little rev so you can hear how she sounds. That's lovely. So let's go and hit the road. We'll belt up and we'll take her out for a drive and I'll tell you what I really think. Guys, I know that you love hearing stories about people's cars and you love hearing a little bit of trivia when we take these cars out. So I thought this car was actually quite interesting to talk about, and not just because it's a Montego and I love rare British leyland cars. This car has a little bit of a story which I actually quite love, and it's almost a bit of an underdog story. And this Montego was somebody's pride and joy. They drove it every day. It was their one owner car. You know when you see those cars that have been owned by people that have really looked after them, and somebody quite rightly saw it and saw the value in it, bought it as their daily, and it got vandalised. And for those of you who know me and know my story about my Morris Minor getting vandalised, things like that really bug me. I always just think, why would you do that? Anyway, I digress. My friend Colin, who is one of the most ambitious men I know, bought this car, and it came to him and it was vandalised, and it was in a scrapyard. It wasn't going to be driven again. And I remember it had a smashed windscreen and all the paint was gone, and it looked ready for something like Scrap Heap Challenge. And he said, "Oh, I've bought this Montego." I said, "Oh, that's cool, send me a picture." And I saw the picture and I thought, right, okay, all right, Colin. And he proved everybody wrong, and now the car that you see today is the Montego that he's made it. Excuse me. He took this car, he resprayed it, he went and got a new windscreen. And if you've got a new car, or you've got a car that's not very old, or part supplies are plentiful, and I'm looking at you Morris Minor and Mini owners, you'll think, so just need a new screen and some paint. But the thing is that, and I talk about this all the time, especially with the Metro, is that some of these cars, even from like the 90s now, are becoming obsolete, and the parts are becoming obsolete. And I know that Colin spent ages and ages trying to find a windscreen for this car. And I love when you meet somebody who takes on a car that's not worth as much as you think it would be, and that's the case with the Montego. He took this car on, and he's just turned it into this amazing car, and I love that. And I love the fact that he is using a car almost daily whose parts are obsolete. I mean, it's just amazing, isn't it? I just love it. So you may be saying, well, looks like a bit of a boring dad car, and I can't disagree with you. It does look a bit boring from the outside, but you know what they say, never judge a book by its cover, because I am finding this car to be incredibly comfortable. And it's not really a surprise, because it was aimed at your chap that was going out doing sales here, there and everywhere, stopping off at Little Chef for a cup of tea and a bacon sandwich on the way, your salesmen that were going all over the country, and then this isn't a countryman, but you could have got a countryman as well, and they were aimed at people that surprisingly were living in the country and needed something maybe to cart the dogs about, or all their stuff. And it wasn't really aimed at kind of your bottom level buyer. It was more aimed at kind of your middle class buyer, and it does feel like a very safe choice. And I think that's partly as well because it was going after those people that had maybe moved away from the British car industry and were looking at things like Volvos, or your bigger estate cars. And you know what, this is a nice car to drive. I think if I'd been looking for a car for that sort of use, I think, you know what, it is a good choice. This is one of the biggest cars I've ever driven, and I keep looking in the rearview mirror and I'm like, oh my god, there is so much car behind me, and it's a bit weird really, because it doesn't feel, when I'm driving straight on, it doesn't feel like I'm driving a massive car. Like, it feels quite wide, but it doesn't feel like there's all that car behind me. And it's a bit of a surreal experience really, because the steering is just as light as the Metro. In fact, maybe in some ways lighter than the Metro, and it's really gliding along the road. And I thought in my head that it was going to feel like an absolute weapon that I was driving down the high street, like a real tank that I could like mow down the street with. But actually it doesn't feel like that at all, and I thought I would feel overwhelmed driving it. I thought like, oh my god, it's too much car, I can't do it, and I was ready to wimp out. But I'm so glad I didn't, because it's a real surreal experience. I can't really describe it actually, which really I'm failing at when I'm talking to you on a video. But it almost feels like, because when I have driven modern cars before for work, and it just feels like there's so much car around me, and I feel so overwhelmed, I feel like I'm totally out of touch with how big the car is and what I'm doing. But the way I'm sat up in this car, and I can see right over the end of the bonnet, even though I'm quite short, and as long as I don't look in the rear view mirror and scare myself with how much car there is behind me, it's actually a really nice car. And I feel really bad, because I said to Colin I thought it was a bit of a boring dad car, but I'm kind of changing my mind, and I could definitely get on board with the Montego, I think. Now, as I've kind of alluded to all the way through this video, the car is very rare, and you don't see them out anymore, even though you used to all the time when we were younger, and it's so strange. And to add to the car's rarity, can you believe it actually shares the owners club? It doesn't even have just its own single mark owners club. It actually falls under the Maestro and Montego owners club. So if you're in any doubt to how rare this car is, that is a very good indication. Now, although I've kind of bored on about how functional it is and how comfortable and what I can only describe as a safe bet, I do actually really like it, because the handling of the car feels very sure, like it's very sure of itself. You know, it's not skittish, and it doesn't feel, because when I drive my Metro, I feel like I'm driving what I can only describe as like one of those little banger cars that you get at fairgrounds and stuff. But this feels like it's really sticking to the road. It feels very smooth. The gearbox is, do you know, the gearbox is really nice on this car, and the engine is so quiet. I can actually, novelty, I can hear myself think when I drive. And actually, I think for the money now, if you could get a Montego, I would say do it, because they're not expensive, because they haven't got that, you know, they haven't got that scene tax that you see on like Fords and VWs, and there aren't many left. So if you're watching this video and thinking, I'd quite like a Montego actually, I think you should do it, because it's quite a nice car to drive. I think it would do 1,000 jobs quite happily. Everything under the bonnet, as you saw when we had a look, was quite straightforward. It's really comfortable. I feel like I'm just sat at home in a chair with like a little wheel in front of me. It's quite attractively laid out inside, so everything is very functional. You've got all your little lights that you might need on a modern car. People have bamboozled themselves into thinking they need all this modern, you know, I need a button for this and I need a button for that, but actually I don't think you do, and I think that everything you need is on this Montego.
Especially for those of you abroad, you may not know too much about the Austin Montego, or the Rover Montego in this case, so I thought I'd tell you a little bit about it. So it was launched in 1984 and it ran until 1988 under British Leyland, and it was badged the Austin Montego. And after that they started to phase it out, so you'll have seen at the start of the video that just had the Montego badge on the front. It didn't have, you know, your Rover badge or your Austin badge, but when they were sold in dealerships they were sold under the Rover name. And this one I'm driving today was sold under the Rover name, and Rover they sold it as the Rover Montego between 1988 and 1995, but really started pushing that Rover connection from 1990. And for those of you who are saying, well, what did it replace? It replaced the Morris Citao and the Austin Ambassador, both of which actually are really lovely cars, but again, just like the Montego, they're quite rare. And it was launched, so whenever they used to launch cars, and it's still the same to this day, you're looking at who your competitors are within the same range, and it was launched against kind of things like the Sierra and the Cavalier, and it was, you know, it's a car that you could take quite far. Now, one of the other interesting things I found out when I was doing a little bit of digging was that it was the last car to be sold as an Austin, which is quite sad actually, because when I think of Austin, I think of, you know, cars that are really good, and I hold it as a car name, you know, car manufacturer in quite high regard. Now, as I kind of talked about all the way through the video, these cars are very rare. And when I say very rare, I don't mean, you know, like some of the other classics where you've only got maybe 5 to 10,000 left on the road. We are saying there's a less than 100 Montegos on the road today, which is so disheartening because so many were sold and so many were made, you know, under different engine sizes, under different names, like the Countryman, for example. And to say there's less than 100 left is absolutely bonkers. However, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and I think these guys need a special mention, and I've already kind of briefly mentioned them already. It's the Maestro and Montego Owners Club, and I actually really love the fact that they do have an owners club, because without owners clubs, honestly, cars get forgotten, cars die, there's no support there for you, especially if you own an obsolete car, and there's just no support. So owners clubs don't just help you find other people that have got the same car as you, they are a really good support network as well for when you need parts or moral support or a bit of technical. And the Maestro and Montego Owners Club was launched in 1999, and considering how many of these cars are left, it's pretty good going that there are over 200 members worldwide. Now, I'm going to have to sadly park this car up and hand the keys back. I am absolutely gutted. I thought I was going to get in this car today, not enjoy it, and think, oh God, what a boring car. But I have honestly been proven wrong. It has been, I would say, one of the nicer drives that I've had, and I have actually really enjoyed it. So, if you're sat at home thinking, maybe a Montego's for me, why don't you give it a try? Because I am very certain that you won't be disappointed.
Guys, I really hope you've enjoyed my video on this Austin, or should I say in this case, facelift Rover Montego from 1990. And how could I not say goodbye to you by demonstrating the amazing amount of space that's available in this car. And if you're looking for a second-hand car and you do a lot of tip runs, or in fact you're probably an antiques dealer and you don't fancy a Volvo, this is probably an excellent choice. Anyway, I'm waffling on, so I hope you've enjoyed the video. Don't forget to hit like if you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed driving it. Any comments you've got about the car or the channel in particular, leave them in the comments section below. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe, because new videos go up every Wednesday and every Sunday. And until next time, take care and drive safely.